The resounding sound of explosions still echoed in James Donovan's mind as he drove along the deserted road leading to the animal shelter. It was as if the ghosts of his last mission were haunting him, reminding him that some bonds are never truly broken, even when war ends. With his heart racing and his hands trembling on the wheel, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was calling him to relive the past. James was a 38-year-old veteran who carried both the marks of war and the weight of a loss that had followed him since his time in the Middle East. Ace, his loyal German Shepherd, had been more than just a combat dog. He was his companion, the link that kept him human amid the brutality of conflict. However, after a severe injury, fate had separated them. Even after all these years, the memory of Ace made James's heart beat erratically. Upon sighting the rusted gate of the shelter, James felt a mixture of hope and fear. Every wrinkle on his face told battle stories, and every scar on his chest was a reminder that war never truly ends. He parked the car and, with determined steps, approached the building. The strong scent of disinfectant and the constant sound of barking composed the soundtrack of that unexpected reunion. Inside the shelter, the atmosphere was heavy and silent. Metal cages lined up like sentinels of a forgotten past. It was then that Rebecca, a young employee with compassionate eyes, approached him. "Good afternoon. Can I help you?" she asked, her voice blending empathy with professionalism. James, without taking his eyes off the cages, replied in a grave tone, "I'm looking for a German Shepherd, a dog that was my partner on the battlefield." Rebecca nodded and, with an inviting gesture, led him down the narrow corridors. As they walked, the surroundings revealed details that seemed to echo the loneliness of the animals housed there. Every dog seemed to carry a distant look, as if they too bore invisible scars. When they reached a cage at the end of the corridor, Rebecca stopped and said, "This one arrived just a few weeks ago. He's reserved and doesn't react well to visitors." James leaned in to look and, in a moment that seemed to freeze time, his eyes fixed on a German Shepherd with black and brown fur, a tense posture, and a lost gaze. An inexplicable feeling invaded his chest, mingling joy and pain. "Ace," he murmured, his voice choked, as he extended his hand in a gesture of recognition. The dog slowly raised his head. For a brief moment, Ace's eyes met James's. But instead of the explosion of joy or the warmth of a reunion he had expected, there was a disturbing emptiness, a silence that seemed to say something terrible had happened to his old friend. "He doesn't recognize me," James whispered, feeling as if Ace's soul were shrouded in shadows. With an expression of sorrow, Rebecca explained, "He bears deep marks of trauma. He's been through experiences that left him constantly on alert. It's hard for him to trust." James's heart tightened. He knew that the horrors of war weren't the only things that left scars. Cruelty and abandonment could also destroy precious bonds. Even so, the desire to restore the connection with Ace burned intensely within him. "I want to adopt him," he declared with conviction, even amid the silence and pain permeating the atmosphere. Rebecca nodded, filling out the paperwork while James remained there, staring at the dog who had been his partner in so many battles. Amid the forms and signatures, a sense of defiance and hope mingled. He was determined to rebuild what time had nearly erased. As the final documents were signed, James looked at Ace, whose posture still carried the tension of the past. In him lay the promise of redemption and the certainty that with patience and love, even the most wounded hearts could find a new path. With the paperwork finalized, the shelter silently gave way to a new journey. As he left, James felt as though he were crossing a boundary, from what had been to what could be again. The reunion would not be simple, and trauma would be an unforgiving adversary, but the flame of friendship still burned, ready to rekindle the lost bond. The road home was laden with uncertainties, but also with a silent promise to restore what war had nearly destroyed. And at that moment, under the twilight sky, James knew that every step he took was a step toward redemption, both for him and for Ace. The journey back was a mix of silence and turbulent thoughts. In the car, Ace lay in the back seat, his eyes ever watchful, as if anticipating any movement that might reopen old wounds. James drove with a heavy heart, recalling the intense days of combat and the endless nights during which his loyal German shepherd had shown him the true meaning of loyalty and courage. Now, the shadow of trauma hovered over both of them, yet the hope of rebuilding their lost bond outweighed any fear. Upon arriving at his home, a weathered wooden house that James had bought to start anew, the atmosphere felt quietly welcoming. He opened the door carefully, almost as if he wanted to preserve something delicate. Ace exited slowly, and upon catching the familiar scent of home, he paused for a moment hesitant. James approached with gentle steps, feeling the tension in the air. "Here, you're safe," he murmured, extending his hand in an attempt to offer comfort. Ace did not respond with the spontaneity of old. Instead, he retreated to a corner where shadow and uncertainty mingled. That night, as the rain lightly tapped against the windows, James sat on the couch with a bottle of beer and watched Ace, who remained motionless, lost in silent thoughts. Every drip from the roof seemed to mark the cadence of a painful memory. Deep inside, James felt that this reunion was only the beginning of a long healing process. A process that would involve confronting not only the trauma of the battlefield, but also the scars left by abandonment and mistreatment that Ace had endured. The next day, the routine began with small gestures. James left doors wide open and spaces uncluttered, allowing Ace to move freely without feeling chained by painful memories. However, the dog still hid, preferring to observe from the back of a room. On a gray morning, as the timid sun struggled to break through the clouds, James found a forgotten note in the kitchen. It was a short message, written in trembling handwriting, that read, "Fear hides in every shadow, but courage is born in the light you choose." Though he didn't know who had left it, the message rekindled a spark of hope. Perhaps, he thought, fate itself was telling him not to give up. Determined to help Ace overcome his traumas, James began researching therapies for traumatized animals. He discovered that the environment, patience, and consistency were essential to restore trust. Thus, he started planning daily activities that could little by little bring the dog closer to him. He scattered toys around the house and sat calmly, waiting for Ace to approach on his own. Every small interaction, every exchanged glance, was a step toward rebuilding a bond that had long been lost. One afternoon, as the wind howled outside, James found himself in the backyard with Ace. The dog sat at a safe distance, his eyes fixed on the horizon where clouds mingled with memories of days gone by. With his heart racing, James said, "Remember when we used to run together? When every step was a victory?" Ace's silence was the response, but in that silence, James believed there was a message. He knew that invisible scars are hard to heal and that the road ahead would be long. However, every gesture of patience and every whispered word could be the key to unlocking the doors hidden within those eyes. As the day turned into dusk, James decided to try something new. He sat on the floor, holding Ace's leash, and remained in absolute silence, letting time pass slowly. Gradually, the dog lifted his head, his eyes shining with a cautious curiosity. For an instant, past and present merged, and in that brief contact, James saw a glimpse of the Ace he longed to recover. That night, as the clock signaled the beginning of a new cycle, James realized that despite the traumas and scars, the bond between him and Ace was a flame that refused to die. It took courage to face the past and transform every shadow into a new chapter of redemption. Winter had arrived, bringing with it long, cold nights that seemed to reflect the state of mind of both James and Ace. Every morning was a new challenge, but also an opportunity to forge a path to healing. Determined to reconnect with his faithful friend, James redoubled his efforts to turn the house into a sanctuary of safety and love. On a gray Saturday morning, James woke up early, feeling the weight of sleepless nights and troubled dreams. But today, something different hung in the air. He brewed a strong coffee and, staring out the window, contemplated what he could do to help Ace open up more. He decided that this morning he would try a new approach, using sensory stimuli to evoke happy memories. He gathered a box of old photos, images of countryside days and moments of camaraderie, and spread them out in a corner of the living room near the fireplace. As the soft light of dawn bathed the room, James called, "Ace, come here." His voice was gentle, yet laden with emotion. Slowly, the dog began to emerge from his hiding place, his eyes fixed on the images that evoked memories of simpler times. For the first time in a long while, Ace cautiously approached, sniffing the photos as if trying to absorb every detail. James's heart filled with hope. He knew that the traumas wouldn't vanish overnight, but every small step forward was a victory. For the rest of the day, he dedicated himself to creating moments of interaction. Gentle play with a ball, long walks in the garden, and above all, shared moments of silence where words were unnecessary. Every gesture, every exchanged glance, was a brick in the reconstruction of the bond that time had nearly unraveled. During one of these walks in the park, James stopped before an ancient tree, its branches telling tales of resilience and renewal. He crouched down and in a nearly imperceptible voice said, "I know the pain is great, Ace, but every step we take together is a new chance to start over." Ace paused for a moment, as if listening to those words resonating deep within him. The two remained there, in the park's quiet, where time seemed to slow down to let old wounds begin to heal. As days turned into weeks, the atmosphere at home gradually changed. The doors that once stood wide open began to be explored by Ace with more confidence. James, always attentive, adjusted his strategies according to the dog's reactions, celebrating every small advancement with the conviction that love and patience were the best remedies for invisible scars. That night, after a long walk under a starry sky, James sat with Ace by the fireplace. As the comforting warmth filled the room, he whispered, "We're going to make it, partner. I will never give up on you." The look in Ace's eyes, once filled with distrust, now carried a timid spark of recognition. In that moment, James understood that the journey of reconstruction was made up of small moments, of silent gestures, of touches that spoke louder than words. Winter, with its frigid nights, gradually gave way to the promise of a new season. And just as nature renewed itself, the bond between James and Ace began to blossom. Each day, the past transformed from being a burden into a memory that strengthened them for the future. And under the soft glow of the moon, as shadows danced along the walls of the house, James knew that reuniting with Ace was more than a physical rescue. It was the resurrection of a friendship that had endured time and pain. With the arrival of spring, James's house seemed to be reborn along with nature. Flowers bloomed in the garden, and the song of birds filled the air with a lightness that contrasted sharply with the dark days of winter. Inside the home, the transformation was equally noticeable. Ace, who once hid in lonely corners, was beginning to show signs of trust. And James, with a renewed gaze, felt that every day spent with the dog was a new opportunity for redemption. On a radiant Sunday morning, James prepared a special breakfast. He sat at the table with Ace close by, who, surprisingly, broke from his habitual routine to come nearer. As the sun's rays flooded the room, James gently ran his hand over Ace's head, as if trying to convey all his hope and love. That simple gesture was the consecration of a long journey, one filled with meaning. Determined to elevate Ace to a new level, James planned an entire day dedicated to the dog's emotional rehabilitation. Together, they went to the park where just days earlier, they had taken a walk that marked a milestone in rebuilding their bond. Amidst the vibrant nature, James set up a small picnic. He spread a colorful blanket on the lawn and arranged toys that once made Ace run with joy. The atmosphere was full of life, and every sound seemed to celebrate the new phase that was beginning. While James organized the items, Ace watched intently, as if trying to decipher the meaning of the day. As hours passed, the dog started to let go, leaving behind the shadows of a painful past. First came a timid glance, then a hesitant approach. When James tossed a blue rubber ball, the very one used during training, Ace, with an energy that surprised them both, ran after it, grabbed it with vigor, and returned, dropping it at James's feet with an almost imperceptible gleam in his eyes. That moment was magical. There was no more room for old fears, only the renewal of a bond that grew stronger with every game and every shared laugh. James felt as though he could hear Ace's heart beating, setting the rhythm for a new life. They sat side by side, and in a gesture of trust, Ace rested his head on James's shoulder, a silent message that said, "I'm ready to move forward." As the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky in warm shades of orange and red, James reflected on the journey that had united them. Every scar, every painful moment, and every small progress all wove together the story of redemption they were now living. There, in each other's company, the past ceased to be a prison and transformed into a memory that fortified them for future challenges. Upon returning home that night, the atmosphere felt imbued with a renewed calm. James, seated on the couch, looked at Ace sleeping soundly beside him, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. This new beginning wasn't easy, but it was living proof that with patience and love, even the deepest wounds can heal. As the clock marked the end of another day, James looked at Ace and whispered, "You are proof that hope never dies, partner." The ensuing silence was filled with meaning. It wasn't merely the quiet of the night, but the celebration of a friendship that had overcome the horrors of the past to be reborn in the light of redemption. And so, amid laughter, tears, and silent gestures of affection, the story of James and Ace became a testament to resilience. The flame of friendship, though once threatened by the shadows of war and abandonment, now burned brightly, a beacon of hope for everyone who believes in the power to start over. Did you enjoy this moving story of reunion, overcoming adversity, and resilience? Then don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring narratives like this one. Your support is essential for us to continue bringing touching stories about friendship, courage, and transformation. Turn on notifications so you won't miss the next chapters of these incredible journeys. And now we want to know, have you ever experienced a reunion that marked your life? Have you overcome a challenge that seemed impossible? Share your experience in the comments and inspire others with your story.